Welcome to the Extra Mile podcast for bar exam takers. There are no traffic jams along the Extra Mile when you're studying for your bar exam. And now, your host, Jackson Mummy, owner of the Celebration Bar Review.
Well, hey everybody, welcome to episode 180 of the Extra Mile podcast for bar exam takers. This is your host, Jackson Mummy. Glad to have you with us. I hope that by the time this episode is released, the world is starting to warm up a little bit. It has been a cold week all across the United States. We even got a little chilly here in Florida, got down into the low 30s, which I know to some of you would seem like a heat wave, but let me tell you, hard to wear the short sleeves in the low 30s. So hopefully it's warming up. Things are getting better. We are certainly getting closer to the bar exam, 50 some days away. And last week, as the weather and the temperature was getting so much colder, I heard from several students who said, I am so grateful I'm in a home study course. I've got friends that are driving on slick, icy, snowy roads to get to a lecture hall to watch a video, right? Just one of many things that they're going to discover about the Big Box Bar Review, kind of bait and switch on some of those things. So there you go. But hopefully you're doing well and you're studying and making progress with your studies, and we are so glad to have you with us today. Now, if this is your first time on the podcast, we want to welcome you. Also let you know that we have all of the past episodes of the podcast available on our website at celebrationbarreview.com. You could just click on the tab at the top for podcasts, and you can go all the way back to episode 000. We've got the show notes and all of the information. We've been doing these episodes for a while now in both audio and video format. If you want to listen to the podcast, you can do that on iTunes Radio. You can do it in Spotify. You can do it in iHeartRadio. So you've got several different ways to consume that material. If you prefer to watch the video of each episode, you can do that by going to our website and just entering the episode number. So in today's episode, it's celebrationbarreview.com/180. And then you can check it out, and we've got the show notes on the video page as well. So whatever way is best for you, we're glad to be able to share this information with you, and we're glad that you are with us. Now, as I said, we're about 50 days to the bar exam for February 2018, and I know we've got a lot of people preparing for that test. We've also got people starting to get ready for the July 2018 exams, and today's episode, I think, is going to be valuable regardless of which test date you're looking at. We're in the middle of a series that we entitled Bar Study Tools. And in episode 179 last week, we looked at the first of our tools, PhotoReading. Today we're going to look at a second tool called MindMapping, and I'm going to walk you through MindMapping and 6 questions that people ask me about MindMapping just to give you a taste and a feeling for it. So regardless of what exam date you're sitting for, I think you'll find MindMapping is a tool that you could employ immediately, very easily, and see enormous results from. So I hope you'll stick around for that discussion. Now, before we jump to our discussion of mind mapping, I want to let all of you know that we do have a special free webinar available called How to Make the Next Bar Exam Your Last Bar Exam. This is a look at the powerful, proven way to pass. And during this webinar, we're going to take you through the 4-step process that we use to help students pass the bar, no matter how many times they've taken and failed in the past. And we'll be sharing case studies with you, some remarkable case studies of people that have failed the bar as many as 20 times before they passed. And it's pretty amazing, pretty inspirational, and very informative information. As I said, it's totally free. We offer the webinar on Thursday night, January 11th at 7 p.m. Eastern, and again on Monday, January 15th, same time, 7 p.m. Eastern. So that would be 4 o'clock Pacific time in both instances. To register for the webinar, and you do need to be registered, you can go to our website at celebrationbarreview.com. There's a button right at the top of the page to claim your free seat, and we'll get you registered. Or if you're watching this as a video today on our podcast page, just scroll down to the bottom of the page and you'll see a link where you can register. And then we'll see you either on Thursday night or Monday night at 7 p.m. Eastern for our webinar, How to Make the Next Bar Exam Your Last Bar Exam. Please don't miss it. It's really powerful information, and I think you're going to find it really incredibly helpful as you get underway with your bar studies. All right, let's jump into our discussion of mind mapping today, the second of our 4 tools that we're going to be talking about this month. And let me give you a little bit of background about why we discussed and why we wanted to add mind mapping as a particular tool that we were interested in. For many years, we've had students taking the photo reading course that's offered by Learning Strategies, Paul Sheely. And as part of that course, he talks about mind mapping as an activation tool. And so some students did it, some did not. What I began to notice over time, however, was that the students who were mind mapping seemed to have better recall of the information, better ability to use the information, and they really liked the idea of mind mapping. It just seemed a little cumbersome to me, and I couldn't quite figure out how to get my arms around it in a way to teach it that would really work out well. Then in 2017, I had the opportunity to work with the lead trainer from Learning Strategies, a woman by the name of Millicent St. Clair. You've heard her on some of our previous episodes, and last week's episode 179, you heard her talking about photo reading. And Millicent and I did a live 2-day seminar here in Celebration in 2017 on photo reading and mind mapping and some other topics related to studying for the bar. Well, as we were working and preparing for the section on mind mapping, it became abundantly clear to me that we could, in fact, teach mind mapping in a way that would really make sense to a broader number of students for the bar, and that we needed to do that because it was such a powerful tool. And as I began to watch my students and the results that they were getting with mind mapping, I really was convinced that I needed to start engaging more of them in this process. Now, if you listen to episode 179, we talked about photo reading and how important a tool that is. And we talked about the fact that we've had students showing increases of 10 points, 20 points, 30 points, 70 points or more on their bar scores because they're using these tools of photo reading. Well, what we didn't say explicitly is that a lot of those same students were also using MindMap as a way to activate what they were learning. And so we wanted to bring that to a broader audience. And so in our boot camp, we talked about mind mapping. And since that time, we've been talking about it pretty actively. And so today I thought it would make sense to actually take a deeper dive into mind maps by looking at the 6 questions that people seem to want to know most about when they're first introduced to this idea of creating a mind map. So if that makes sense, that's what we're going to do right now. All right, well, the first of our 6 questions is very simply, what's a mind map? I mean, what is this thing? And the best way that I can describe a mind map is that it's a picture. It's a word picture. It's got some images. It's got a organizational representation with a core concept typically in the middle, and then branches leading out from that concept to sub-concepts or sub-ideas, and then branches from those branches, just like a tree would branch out one level after another. One way to describe a mind map is that it's a tool to engage with the written word. In other words, one of the things that we want you to do when you're reading is to be engaged, to be actively engaged with what you're reading. And unfortunately, what happens to a lot of people is that they read passively and they don't really have any idea of what they've just read. You've had that experience, you're reading, and then your head kind of dips and you're like, oh, whoa, what happened here? Where did I go off the rails? Well, with mind maps, you've got a tool that's going to help you engage much more effectively and much more consistently with the material that you're reading. So it's a tool, first of all, for that purpose. The second way I'd answer the question of what's a mind map is that it is a tool that allows you to use visual imagery to engage your non-conscious brain. Now, you've heard us perhaps talk about in other situations that there's a conscious brain, the executive function, the part of the prefrontal cortex up here, that represents about 10% of our brain capacity. And you've heard it said that we only use about 10% of our brain. That's what people are referring to. That remaining 90% is not subconscious or unconscious, it's non-conscious. It's the part of our brains that control the automated systems and autonomic systems of our living day to day. And it's also the part of our brain that just has the greatest depth, has the greatest ability to recall information and take in information. It is the powerful part of our brain. Tends to be more the right side of the brain. It's more visual. It's more picture, smell, feel, taste, sensation. Whereas the executive function tends to be the left side of the brain. Logic, structure, organization, and so on. Well, when we're using a mind map, what we've got is a tool that allows us to engage with our non-conscious brain. We're really dealing with primarily the right side of the brain, the non-conscious brain. And so mind maps are written or created documents that allow you to engage with that part of your brain. The third way I'd describe or define what a mind map is, it is a conceptual map of material shown in relationship. Let me say that again. It's a conceptual map of material shown in relationship. You see, one of the problems in the bar exam and for bar students is that you get a series of random ideas, kind of like fireworks that are just popping up all over the sky all at once. You're not quite sure what to make of them. It's just random. Here's something, here's something, here's something, here's something. The idea, however, is to coordinate all of that, to put it together. And if you've ever watched a fireworks show where it's choreographed to the music and the lights, and it's one piece of fireworks followed by another and flowing one to the other, you can see that when it's in relationship, it makes a beautiful picture. Well, in the same way, when you're photo reading or reading and creating a mind map, what you're doing is creating a concept map. You're taking the material you've read and you're putting it together in relationship. You're showing how one idea connects to another idea and connects to another. Now that's significant because most note-taking that's done for the bar exam is totally non-contextual. It's just, here's an idea, here's a rule, here's an element, here's an element, here's an element. So what? And it's very hard to remember all of that, isn't it? Because there's no context, there's no relationship, there's no way to see how one thing puts into context with something else. When you use a mind map, you're forced to actually see what those relationships are and then to explicitly draw out the relationship. There's a line, there's a connection, there's a drawing, there's something that relates one idea to another idea or one piece of information to another. And so mind maps allow us to see materials in relationship. So when you put those three things together, what is a mind map? Well, it's a tool that allows you to engage with the written word. It uses visual imagery to engage your non-conscious brain, and it helps you develop relationships by creating a conceptual map. Now, you might be saying, that's all well and good, but what the heck is a mind map? Well, very simply, it's a piece of paper in which you've drawn out material that you've read, you've interacted with it, and you've put it into a new form. It's a different form of note-taking. So my second question that I get asked then from there is usually, well, why should I use mind maps for the bar exam? And that's a fair question for sure. Well, the first reason that I would tell you to use a mind map for the bar exam is that we see that it improves recall of the material substantively and substantially. And here's what we mean by that. When you're creating traditional notes, maybe you're outlining or you're taking notes or making flashcards or you're highlighting or doing something of that nature, you know that it's very difficult to recall that material later. In fact, that's why there's an entire industry built around mnemonics and memorization recall. In fact, there's even a technique in which you memorize by putting certain information in certain mental rooms in your brain, and then you go to that room to find the information. I mean, there's all kinds of techniques you can use to improve memory, but the reason you need them in the first place is that there's no contextual relationship with the material that you're taking notes on. So when you create a mind map for the bar exam, one of the things that happens is you're now engaging your non-conscious brain, which has a functioning power much greater than your conscious brain, and you're engaging it at a very deep level, this sensory level, by using color, by using sight, by using words in combinations, by drawing pictures, by being kinesthetically involved. All of this improves your recall of the material. And so when we test students based on what they recall, what we see is that typically a photo reader who will read at 25,000 words per minute has a 70% tested recall on the multi-state, as compared to a traditional reader at about 100 to 150 words per minute, not 1,000, 150 words versus 25,000 with a 50% recall. When we add the mind maps, we see that material recall go up much greater for both groups. So we think it's a really powerful tool for that reason alone. But the second reason I think you want a mind map for the bar exam is that it allows you to understand these concepts, as I said, in context. You see, it's not just memorizing and recalling the information, it's actually using it contextually. When you're asked to write a bar essay, you have to use the law. When you're answering an MBE question, you have to see the context of the rule as it's being applied. How do you do that? Well, if you've engaged with the material as you've been learning and studying in a contextual relationship, that is, to see how things fit together, what is part of something else, kind of what I call the Russian nested doll syndrome, then the ability to use that material on the bar exam is much, much greater. And this is what mind maps allow people to do. They can get a greater understanding of concepts by creating the context. And that comes from you interacting with the material, creating the physical product that is called a mind map. And all of this then leads to the third reason that you should mind map for the bar exam, and that is that it forces you as a reader to interact with the text. I can't say this strongly enough. Too many bar students, for understandable reasons, just don't interact with the material that they're getting. You know, they sit in a classroom and they listen to a lecture and they doze off, or they're reading and they doze off, or they take these random notes, or they highlight obsessively, or they make marginal notes, and then they don't do anything with them. It has no value to them whatsoever. You see, the key to really working and reading anything is to be able to interact with the text, to have a conversation with the author. We had a lot of fun at our photo reading boot camp because we talked about that metaphor, and I was standing there and I'm the author, right? And so students had the chance to interact with the author, but also to do it through their reading and through the creation of the mind map. When you interact with what you've read, you're going to know that material better. You're going to know it better because there's a kinesthetic value, using your hands and your motor skills. There's also the ability and the opportunity to simply reorganize the material in a way that makes sense to you. And I think that's really a powerful opportunity to see and use this material and say, how does it fit together? You know, there's a taxonomy, if you will, to the law. There's a reason that we use different subjects, and that within different subjects we have different subtopics. And yet we really lose track of that on the bar exam. We just see it as a series of disconnected random pieces of information. Well, you can only carry so many random disconnected pieces of information in your brain. The whole idea here is to be able to start connecting them so that there's a daisy chain and you can get that information. Now, when we talk about mind mapping for the bar exam, we're actually talking about what we would call intentional activation. When you've read material, whether you've read it as a photo reader or a traditional reader or something in between, you have to activate what you've already put into your brain, what you've read. That can happen spontaneously. You just read a question or a problem and you know the answer without knowing quite why. But then there's also intentional activation, and this is a form of intentional activation. It's a way to take what you're doing, what you're reading, and make it powerful and usable to you. And so that's why I think you should use the mind map. Will it improve your score in the bar exam? Yes, I think it will. We've seen that result consistently. All right, the third of our 6 questions. Big question. Maybe I've gotten you kind of intrigued or interested now, and you're thinking to yourself, well, wait a minute, is this only for somebody that does that weird thing he talks about called photo reading? And the answer is no, it's not just for photo reading. Now, in order to help explain why mind mapping is useful at all these different levels, I want to use the analogy of speed limits when you're driving a car. You know, if you're driving through a school zone during certain hours, you've got to go 15 miles an hour. And 15 miles an hour is a pretty good description of the way most people read for the bar. Line by line, word for word, sentence by sentence, trying to drill down and get every detail. But you know you don't make very much progress at 15 miles an hour. Well, then we also have 35 mile an hour zones when we're driving. And this is, we can go a little bit faster, but we're still got to be careful. We're on a residential street, for example. In the bar, 35 miles an hour means, you know, I don't have to read it for really super heavy detail, but I want to get through the material and I want to keep a reasonable clip. So I'm going to skim just a little bit, but generally I'm still reading for a fair amount of detail. Then there's 50 miles an hour. At 50 miles an hour, now maybe I'm pressed for time. I just don't have many days until the bar exam. I've got to read faster whether I like it or not. And now I'm just reading the headlines and the bold type or the call-out boxes or the first and last sentences of the paragraph. All of those are forms of faster reading for traditional readers. Mind mapping will work at any of those speeds. Now, obviously, if you're mind mapping, you don't need to go 15 miles an hour because you know that when you're done reading, you're going to go back to the material, you're going to revisit it, you're going to recreate it in this new form called a mind map. So I think it eliminates the need to have to read at a super slow speed. But let's say you're at a 35 or a 50 mile an hour speed. Well, mind mapping is going to help you feel more comfortable that what you read at that speed, now you can go back and extract the relevant information. But here's the good news. If you're a photo reader, to use my analogy, you're not going 50 miles an hour. You're not going 70 miles an hour. You're going 500 miles an hour. And when you start doing that, you are ripping through the material. A traditional, typical outline for the bar exam will take most people about 6 to 8 hours to read at that slow speed, that 15 miles an hour speed. A photo reader can get through that same material in about 10 minutes. Wow. If I can get through that material in 10 minutes and then use the next 6+ hours to create mind maps, to interact and to work with the material, to engage the reader or engage as a reader with the author, that's pretty powerful stuff, isn't it? And if the sloth back there is still reading at 15 miles an hour, see the tort happen. It's, oh my God, right? If you could get away from that, you've got such an advantage. So, is mind mapping only for photo readers? No, anyone can use it. But if you're a photo reader, you should be using it. No doubt about it. You absolutely should be using it because it takes advantage of the fact that you're reading into your non-conscious brain to begin with. It's activating that part of your brain and it's giving you recall of the material. But if you're not a photo reader, if you're just a traditional reader or a 35 mile an hour reader or maybe even a 50 mile an hour reader, mind mapping can help you as well. And I don't want you to give up on this concept and think it's only for photo readers. It's just you're really wasting time in the reading until you get past that hump. Now, I know that sometimes people say, well, maybe it's too late for me to learn about photo reading. Not at all. Some of our greatest successes in 2017 came from students that started the photo reading course less than 6 weeks before their bar exam. It's absolutely something you can learn quickly. Photo reading, as you heard in our last episode, takes about 8 hours to learn. We recommend 1 hour a day while you're studying for the bar. So not a big deal at all to integrate that and use it. And we would really encourage it if you're thinking about mind mapping. But mind map no matter what. Don't let photo reading be a barrier to you if you're not someone that's doing that. All right, our fourth question, kind of related to the earlier ones, is does mind mapping replace other forms of note-taking? I hear this a lot from students who say, what I've been doing up till now has been keeping a journal or making flashcards, or maybe I've created mnemonics and outlines and mini outlines. I'm tickled in a weird way when people ask me, do you have a Convisor mini outline for your course? Well, Convisor is a product name from a guy named Convisor that was the original president or one of the original presidents of a big box bar review. They had to create those outlines because their big outlines were so ridiculous that people couldn't get through them and gave up on them, so they created a new mini outline. We don't do that because our photo readers can get through the material so much faster and they can replace these other forms of note-taking. So if you're in one of those courses and you've got your mini outline, you're probably taking maxi notes on your mini outline. Well, you can get rid of all of that. You can just jump past all of that by using mind maps. Instead of doing flashcards or journals or highlighting or underlining, you should be using mind mapping. And what you're going to discover is that it's a net time savings. You see, in all of those tools, what you're really forcing yourself to do is to slow down, to go back to my analogy. You're forcing the pace of your reading down slower and slower. But with this approach, you can go faster and faster, knowing that you're coming back to the material when you're done and now re-engaging with it, extracting from the written material what you need to create your mind map. So what we are recommending to our students is get rid of your flashcards, get rid of your journals, stop highlighting, stop doing the underlining. Now, I know that some of you will probably have to pry that yellow highlighter out of your cold, dead hands 50 years from now because you're just not going to let go of your highlighter. Okay, I get that. But here's the interesting part. If you take that same highlighter and you use it on your mind map and put some color into your mind map and create what you're listening to or what you're reading in a contextual visual form, you're going to be so much happier. You're going to wonder why you ever sat there and tried to highlight your entire bar review outlines. Now, I get it. I know that there will be people out there who will absolutely be sitting at the doorway to the bar exam, still highlighting and underlining and note-taking. They're generally the people that fail the exam. And it's just not a good productive method of studying. So if you are trying to get out of that loop of flashcards and journals and highlighting and underlining, this is a really powerful tool. It encompasses all of that with all the benefits that we've talked about. Now, there's one other way you can use the mind mapping tool that I want to just talk about here, and that is that after you've created your mind map, go ahead and read it out loud. Now, if there's some supportive person in your world, a spouse, a friend, family member who's willing to listen to you talk about this, by all means read it out loud to them. But even better than that is to read it out loud and record it into your phone or your computer. Create an audio recording of you talking through your mind map. Then go back and replay that audio recording at night when you're asleep, at random times when you're in the car and you're driving. This is a great way to review your notes, to see how you've interacted with the material and to see how you've organized it and reorganized it. And it'll be much more effective than what you've been doing currently in terms of note taking. So that's what we would recommend there. All right, we've gone through 4 of our 6 questions. The next question is one of my favorites. Do I need special software or tools or equipment? No, you really don't. You know, it's really pretty simple. Just get some unlined paper, get yourself a package of 6 colored markers, maybe some colored pens, and you're good to go. It can be as simple as that. I have students who have handwritten all of their mind maps. Some of them are very elaborate. Some of them are artists and can draw these incredible pictures. One of my favorites right now is that I have a student who is an artist, and she was doing a remedies mind map, and she drew a picture in the center of a can of Campbell's soup, chicken noodle soup, because it's a remedy, right? And she used that, and then she drew off all of the branches and the concepts and the ideas, and it was just great. I loved it. And it was like, wow, you know, piece of paper, a couple of markers, she drew it, and something that she'll remember, and certainly I'll remember, and easy to think about in terms of remedies. So it can be that simple, just paper and colored markers. Now, if you are afraid of drawing pictures, as I am, there are several different computer programs and applications out there, many of which are free, that you can use to create mind maps. A couple that my students use are Lucidchart, MindMeister, Zen, but you can literally just Google mind maps for the device you've got, and it will give you a whole series of options. Now, some of these mind mapping tools are very sophisticated. They come with all kinds of ability to change colors and designs and outlines and thickness of the lines and add images and so on. Others are pretty straightforward. They're really just diagram specific. And I think the point is, if you're somebody that just gets really bent out of shape if the line isn't exactly straight, then a computer-aided mind map could be a great tool. I like computer-aided mind maps. I just type in all the information I want. I'm not terribly visual in terms of drawing pictures, so I can add pictures or images if I want, but I don't have to, and I've got everything organized, and the computer lays out the organization or helps me organize it so it's all on one page. And that's a really good tool to have. But I think the point I want to make here is that you don't need anything special. If you're feeling like, oh my gosh, I don't want to spend a whole lot more on studying for the bar, well, great. Just get some unlined 8x11, 8x14 paper, a package of colored markers, and you're good to go. It's literally that simple. And check out those free tools. And there are some paid-for versions of mind mapping software, but really not necessary. The free tools are more than sufficient in my experience. All right. So we've been through 5 questions so far. We've looked at what a mind map is, why you should mind map for the bar exam, whether or not it's only for photo readers, whether or not mind mapping replaces other forms of note taking, and whether you need special software and equipment. And now, hopefully, I've gotten enough interest from you that you're excited, you're thinking to yourself, wow, maybe I could use mind mapping. Maybe this would make a more effective way for me to study, because certainly I'm really not loving the process that I'm going through right now. Our 6th question then is, how can I learn more about this process? Well, I'm glad you asked. Yes, I am. As I said, when we did our photo reading bootcamp live seminar, we had the benefit of some training from Millicent St. Clair of Learning Strategies Incorporated. And we talked about mind maps and what they were and how they worked. And we had students in the bootcamp literally create their mind maps and read them and work with them. And it was an extraordinary experience. We videotaped and recorded all of that, and then afterwards I created a live webinar in which I incorporated the teaching that Millicent had done on mind mapping with some specific information about mind mapping for the bar exam and examples from our students and examples that we had done. We talked about literally step by step. How do you begin, create a mind map for the bar exam, study from it, work with it, file it, organize it, keep it, and keep building on it. and I did questions and answers with our students. The webinar was terrific. It was a huge success. And when it was done, we went back and we edited that webinar down to 75 minutes for an on-demand version of the webinar, which we're now going to offer to you. It's available for $95, and once you've purchased the webinar, you can watch it on demand, and you can watch an unlimited number of replays, so it's permanently in your library. We think that this is the best tool for how to use mind mapping that we've seen. It's literally cut right to the stuff that you need, 75 minutes in length. We're going to take you from the beginning of mind mapping, what it is, how it works, how you do it, how you organize it, how you make them, the tools you need, everything that you need to make mind maps work for you. And we've put it all together in a webinar. Now, if you're interested in watching this webinar, you can register and pay your fee, and you can use a debit card, credit card, or PayPal. And we've got a link here on the show notes for this episode, as well as on our video show notes. And all you got to do is click on that link, register. After you've made your payment, you'll receive a password. And once you've got that password, you can go in and watch the webinar at your convenience as often as you want. Now, I think this webinar will be incredibly helpful for you if you're planning on using mind maps. It will show you everything that you need to know. It will give you lots of examples. I think we've probably got 30 or 40 examples of mind maps. So you get to see all the different variants and ideas. You get a real sense of what's possible. And we also, as I say, did a Q&A where we got some great questions, really practical questions from people. And I think you'll find that helpful as well. So that's our look at mind maps. I really encourage you to check out the webinar. It's a great resource, very useful tool. I know that some of you may be stopping at this point and saying, well, I'm not photo reading, so I'm not going to mind map. I think that would be a mistake. I think regardless of how you're reading the material, you probably know that you're not engaging with that material you're reading in a very effective way. I mean, if you can honestly say, I really am engaged with it, I really know it, I've got it, it's all right here, it's all good, I'm raring to go, perfect. But those people aren't listening to this podcast. So let's get real for a minute. You're here because you're struggling, because you want to find out something more. You want to know more about the process. You want to know more about what you have to do to pass the bar exam. Well, here's a great tool. And it's one that I cannot encourage you strongly enough to engage in. You don't have to spend very much money. You just have to put in some time. But it's a time saver all the way down the road. And it will just benefit you so greatly on the test itself. So I really hope you'll consider that. Next week, in our next episode, we're going to look at our third of the 4 tools for bar study. This is a tool that we call a paraliminal. It's a weird word, isn't it? Paraliminal. We'll be looking at paraliminal recordings and how you use those and the importance of them. And I think you'll really like that discussion as well. But for now, that concludes our episode today. I'm glad that you could be with us. I want to just remind you one more time that we've got our free webinar, How to Make the Next Bar Exam Your Last Bar Exam. That's on Thursday, the 11th of January, and Monday, the 15th of January at 7 p.m. Eastern. That's 4 p.m. Pacific time. Go ahead and claim your seat by just clicking on the button here on the video page or by going to celebrationbarreview.com. Well, until next week, stay warm, everybody. Have a great week of study. Hope you get to try some mind maps. Look forward to hearing from you and your results as you do create those mind maps. And we'll see you again in next week's episode. Bye-bye for now.
Thanks for listening to the Extra Mile podcast for bar exam takers at www.celebrationbarreview.com.